So I've come to a typical peg at Omp Match Lake here. Luckily I've got off to a good start, which, you know, you take this in any match. I did start on deck. I do have a line underneath my shallow rigs, but it didn't really last very long because weather and things like that, you know, dictate to obviously what rigs you have. And it didn't take me long to pick my shallow rig up. And as you can see, I mean, they're in absolute lovely condition, these F1s. So you don't need many to really build a weight up. And I mean, things like obviously shallow rigs and things, going back to what I said earlier, being positive. And that actually acts in me approaching the way that I do things. So, I mean, as you can see there, it's extremely positive. My rigs are really positive. I have a short line between my floats and my tip. They're basically, you're trying to make them so they hook themselves. It's so simple. I mean, you can't get much simpler than that. It's basically a piece of 019 Vertex line. And then I use the FD 200 floats, which are actually in line, which obviously everything that pulls, they hook themselves 9 times out of 10. They take 3 number 10s, which I just have as a bulk like that. It means you can have it up. And basically what you're trying to achieve, when your pellet's on the end on the band, is when you flick your rig over, you get 3 splashes in turn. So you flick your rig over, and it actually, to the fish, it looks like you've flicked in 3 pellets. So you're going to get a splash from your float, you're going to get one from your 3 shot, and then obviously the pellet that's on your hook. I use our yellow hollow, which is around 10-11 grade. I think yellow hollow is very forgiving, and it comes out obviously when I like it to be very, very forgiving, because when they do it, they actually just hook themselves. I use a Dacron connector because then it keeps it away from the pole tip, especially when you're flicking the rig over. All it does is keeps it away from the pole tip, so you're never having to tangle round. It's virtually impossible for it to tangle round. I know we used to have the plastic connectors, etc. We've sort of come away from that sort of thing now, and we've gone to these what's called a Dacron. One thing I must stress is when you do elasticate your top kits, is make sure you cut your tips back enough. I see a lot of anglers, they don't cut the tips back enough, and basically what happens is that it creates, when the elastic gets pulled out, it creates a bend in the top kit, and what happens then, it creates friction, which makes the elastic not run smoothly, which is obviously the worst thing that can happen, because as the fish pulls the elastic out, it judders, and that obviously makes you pull out of the fish. One of the other important things is a puller bung. Now, I think nine times out of 10, many anglers are now using these puller bungs. It's because they're so simple. It creates it so we can use a lot softer elastics, you know, which I think is very important, especially when you're fishing shallow in lakes such as this. Because 1, they hook themselves against it, and 2, you know, they can run away from you. You're hooking a fish and they can run. They're not splashing about, and they're not creating the other fish to, you know, move out of your swim. The one thing I didn't mention is what I do. I band my pellet. How easy do you want to make it? I mean, all I do is put a 6mm hard pellet in the band. As you flick the rig over, you've no risk of it coming off, you know, which soft expanders and things like meat do. Obviously a banded pellet don't work like that. Just before I go back out and try and catch another fish, I'd just like to run through bait. I mean, basically all I'm using is 6mm pellets. Now the 6mm pellets are what you've got to use at the fishery, and the fishery pellets, I mean, most fisheries that you go to now, you've got to use their pellets. And like all I do is I just try and pick the more cylinder style pellet out of your feed pellets, and I just basically band one of them. So the fish will actually take it quite naturally because it's what you're feeding. So when you flick your rig over and things like that, the fish coming up competing, and they'll actually take your bait quite confidently. And that's when the fish really do it themselves, and that's when you start putting a good weight together. So let's see if I can go out and prove my theory. One little tip, what I generally try and do is I just try and feed just before I go out. So I'll fill my catapult up. When I say fill it, I'll just feed, you know, 4 or 5 pellets. And what I'll do is I'll just put some pellets out, then the fish are already waiting for you. And then what I generally do is I ship out and try and flick my rig into them pellets that I've just fired out. And hopefully, I say hopefully, there should be one waiting. You do miss a lot of bites in this style of fishing, because what happens is the fish are actually coming up competing for the food. And what generally happens is sometimes obviously they're not eating your pellet, they're eating the pellets that are around your float. And what you know, the tails hit your float, etc. You know, you get a lot of missed bites. But you know, it's one of them things, you've just got to actually go through the motions, and eventually the carp will start competing confidently, and you should I say, catch one every chuck in. you know, it is simplicity in itself, really. I mean, all you do is, if you don't catch one, just literally fill your catapult back up again, 4 or 5 pellets, flick it round your float, and then just flick your rig straight over into it. Again, that creates as though your pellets are hitting the water at the same time as the ones that are going, as the ones that you've fed. There's no point in doing the same feeding pattern all the time. You have got to, you know, you've got to alter it slightly. You know, a few little tricks that you can do. Like I say, you can feed and flick your rig into it. That's just one of the little things that you do. If it don't go under, give it 2 or 3 flicks as though you fed again. Put your rig into it, and hopefully, you know, 9 times out of 10 it goes. So as I say, it's quite simple. I basically just loose fed some, flick my rig into them, and it's absolutely just taken my elastic out. I didn't even need to strike, to be fair. And that just goes to show the fish have actually started competing now. You know, we've just started to get a little ripple on water, which obviously helps fish confidence, etc. You know, they can't see the pole above your head. Absolutely in lovely condition. Good stamp F1s as well. You know, you don't need many in these sort of matches, and that's what, again, that's why I go back to this patience thing. You don't need many. They're, you know, they're a very, very good stamper fish. You know, like a 2 pound F1. Catch one of them most chucks and you'll take some beating on this venue. Generally, basically, another little thing what I try and do is you hook a fish, always try and loose feed. No matter where it is. When you get halfway back, just try and hold it on your lap, or you know, on your box, etc. And just give yourself a minute just to loose feed your peg, just to keep the fish competing while you're doing it. They are a good stamp fish, these here at Laugh, and it's just inside at mouth. I'm just going to show you one more rig which I think is very important. And basically what it is, it's just a deck rig underneath that shallow line. I mean, it's not very deep on this. This is the shallow bank. It's not very deep. It's actually what, 3.5, 4 foot. Although you're fishing shallow and the fish are competing shallow, I think it's very, very important that you do have a deck rig set up. The float itself is in the new FM range. Basically what it is, it's the FM1, and all we've got, it's a 0.3 float, it's a carbon stem and a hollow bristle. You know, they're very strong and very, very versatile. It's got a lovely rugby ball style body on it. That just if the wind does pick up, if you've got any tow, that just, you know, keeps it underneath that, and you've got a lovely, lovely bristle to be able to see. A couple of other things I always put back shot on my deck rigs. All that does is it just keeps your rig in place, which again, as I say, is very, very important. The last thing you want is if the tow or the wind does get up, is your rig start drifting out. Shotting is very simple. It's just a bulk of number 9s there and 2 droppers like that. My first one is straight above my hook length, which is a 6-inch hook length of 013 vertex line. Again, it's very, very simple, but I think it's so important to set this up. One, because sometimes, although it's bright and warm today and you expect the fish to be shallow, sometimes you just don't catch shallow. And you have to have this rig set up just to be able to, the pellets that you've pinged in, you can actually fish on the bottom underneath, where there's actually quite a lot of fish, you know, eating the pellets that have actually sank to the bottom. Again, elastic wise is exactly the same. It's exactly the same what we've already been using. It's our yellow hollow elastic, again, which is, to my, you know, what I personally think, it's so versatile. You can catch anything, you know, from skimmers and things like that, right up to double figure carp. So that's basically my pole approach. Now I'm going to show you something completely different now. It's generally my last option on a match like this, because you'd like to think the fish competing on your pole line. Now I'm going to fish a method feeder, and I generally feed 8 mils over the top. Now while I get that set up, we'll just pop over to Andy and see how he's getting on.